We continue now at the top of Daf Samach Gimel Amud Beis in Meseches Avodah Zara. This is Avodah Zarah Daf 63b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara was asking from a brisa on Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai had said that if you have a situation where individuals borrow peiros shvius, they borrow the produce of the Shemitah year, and then they pay back with other produce in the 8th year, by that time the peiros shvius are no longer around, so we say that that produce of the 8th year is not going to have the kedusha shvius. And the question here is from a brisa. The brisa is dealing with somebody who's paying his workers, and he says to his workers, and these workers are either ovdei kochavim, they're idolaters, not Jewish, or they're amei haaretz, they don't keep the halacha very carefully. In any case, he says to these individuals, take this dinar, and then you're going to use the dinar to eat or to drink. So he doesn't have to be concerned that they're going to buy food which is in violation. He doesn't have to be concerned, lo misham shvius, he doesn't have to be concerned about shvius, about, again, produce of the Shemitah year. V'lo meiser, he doesn't have to be concerned about meiser. V'lo misham yayin nesach, he doesn't have to be concerned about yayin nesach. However, v'imamar lahem, but let's say he says it to them as follows. He says, Tzu'u v'achlu, go and eat what you want to eat. V'ani porei, and then I'll make sure to pay it off. Tzu'u v'shasu, go and drink what you want to drink. V'ani porei, and then again, whatever you owe to the storekeeper, I'll make sure to pay it off. So then already there is a concern. Choshesh misham shvius, umisham meiser, umisham yayin nesach. Then he really does have to be concerned about shvius, about meiser, and about yayin nesach. And Rashi explains, lo misham shvius, again in the first case of the brisa where he just gives them the money and he says use this money for food or drink, he doesn't have to be concerned about shvius, meaning to say, shema yikchu bo peiros shvius, maybe they're going to purchase produce of the Shemitah year, min hachashad lamochram, from somebody who's suspect of selling that when he's not supposed to sell that. V'tanya b'Meseches, we learned in a brisa Meseches sukkah, ein mosrin demei peiros shvius la'amoretz, you're not allowed to give the money of peiros shvius to an amoretz, yoser migim sudos, more than 3 seudos worth, and so maybe you would think that's a problem over here, but it's not a problem, because again, it's not considered a situation of him giving over demei peiros shvius to the amoretz. He's giving them the money, and then they're going ahead and buying what they want to buy. And similarly, v'lo misham meiser, it's not a problem of meiser, meaning dim amei haaretz heim, let's say for example, they're amei haaretz, v'yechu she'eno moser, and they're going to use this money to buy something where the meiser was not taken off. V'nimtza zem achilo, then you could say it turns out that he's giving them food in which meiser was not separated. But that's not true. Da'iu lo safi lo midi. Again, he's not giving them any of that food directly. Elaprita yavlu, he's just giving them the money, and they're going ahead and they're purchasing it. V'lo mishum yayin nesach, and it's also not a concern of yayin nesach. That's im ovdei kochavim him. That's talking about a situation, let's say they're idolaters. V'nimtza machilon yayin nesach. It would turn out that he's essentially paying them with yayin nesach. V'harim izonosein olav, and he owes them food. V'nene miyayin nesach. Then he's getting a benefit from yayin nesach. And again, it's not a problem because he's not giving them the yayin nesach directly. He's just giving them money, and they're going ahead and using that money to purchase yayin nesach. However, let's say he says to them, go get whatever it is that you're going to get, va'ani poreya, and I'll pay it off, then already have a iu lokeach iser, then he's really purchasing the prohibited item, umachilo, and then he's giving that prohibited item to the workers. The hashta lo salak nafshi minayu beprite, here, he's not giving them money and using that to remove his obligation toward them. It's actually considered like he's directly giving them the iser. And so the Gemara continues and asks its question, Alma, we see from this brisa, ki kapara, that when he's paying later on, again in this situation, they're going ahead and eating whatever it is that they're eating, and he's saying later on, I'm going to pay back the storekeeper, but apparently at the time he's paying, even though the item is no longer around, demei iser kapara, what he's considered to be paying is the money of iser, the money of prohibition. So hachanami, so here also when the produce is being given in the 8th year, again after the peiros shvius are no longer around, but still it should be a problem. Ki kapara demei isura, kapara, when he's paying, isn't he paying the money of iser, or in this case the exchange of iser, and it should be problematic. And the Gemara says, Tirgamar Rav Chisda answers that this brisa is talking about a very particular case. It's talking about bechenvani hamakifo. It's talking specifically where it's being brought, where the food or the drink is being bought from a storekeeper who normally extends on credit. It's his regular practice to extend on credit. Now, in those kinds of situations, the mishtabid lay there's already considered to be like a shibud. It's already considered to be owed to the person. The kevon de urche la'kufe, since it's normal for him to extend credit, kani lay dinar gabe, it's like he already has the dinar by him. Meaning to say, it's as if the chenvani already has a shibud on the money from this employer who's going to be paying the money, and therefore it's as if it's being paid really right away. And the Gemara says, 1 second, but then what are you going to say by a storekeeper that doesn't normally extend credit? Apparently mutter, apparently then it would actually be permitted, because then he's not actually paying back until much later on. And again, it would be similar to the produce in the 8th year, and it should be permitted. But that's problematic to say that, because if so, adetani, instead of saying, the first case of the Brisa was, go and take this money and go eat whatever you want to eat, or go drink with this dinar. That was the case that was mutter in the Brisa, but you could have had an even bigger chiddush of a case that was mutter. Liflog velisni bedida. You could have actually made a distinction within the case itself where the person is paying back. Just make a distinction between a storekeeper who is accustomed to extending credit and a storekeeper that's not. It should have said as follows: when is it problematic? It's a problematic by a storekeeper who normally extends credit. Because there already it's considered that there's a certain amount of shiba to the chanvani. But if it's a chanvani, a storekeeper who doesn't normally extend credit, mutter. It's mutter, and that's what it should have said in the Brisa. Instead of giving the case of where he gives them the dinar, this would be an even greater novel idea. It would be a greater chiddush to say that, to make this distinction between a chenvani hamakifo and a chenvani she'ein makifo. And the Gemara continues and asks, v'yoden further, chenvani she'ein makifo. Let's say you have a storekeeper where there's no credit extended. Mi lo meshtabit, is there no shibud over there? Is it really true that there's only a shibud in a situation where the chenvani is accustomed to extending credit? That's not true. V'amar Rava, but Rava said, ha'omer l'chaveiro tein moneh leploni. If a person says to his friend, give a moneh to so-and-so, v'yiknu kol nechsoi, and then all of my property will be acquired to you. Konami din Ariv, that does create an acquisition, and that works through the law of Ariv, which is the law of a guarantor, and that should be in effect over here as well. We will see Rashi in a moment. And so the Gemara rejects this answer of making a distinction between Chenvani Hamakifo and Chenvani Shein Makifo. Elamar Rava, rather Rava says, Loshna Makifo, Veloshna Shein Makifo. You're right. There's no difference between whether he normally extends credit or doesn't normally extend credit. Afagav de Meshabed lei, even though there is a shibud. But Kevan de lo miyachet shibude, since it's not specified what the shibud is, lo mitzar, therefore it is not going to be osir, will not be prohibited. And Rashi explains, Hamakifo again means Sharogel Etzlo B'Hakafa. This is talking about a storekeeper that regularly will extend credit. And the Gemara had said, there is actually a shibud that is created, meaning high balabayis. It means that the balabayis is mishubed to the storekeeper. Mishaita diyav chenvani peri. From the moment that the storekeeper gives the fruit to the workers, that employer is now obligated to the chenvani. V'havikinos and miyad liyad. It's actually like he's giving it directly from one to the other. Kani lei dinar gabe means to say again, it's as if he acquires the dinar. Chenvani samech al zeh shekvar hikir bo. The storekeeper already is relying on it. He knows he's going to get his money. Shekal makom sheyeshno hadinar, wherever that dinar is, kani lo lechenvani, it's acquired to the chenvani. Hilka chalipe ninu. Therefore, it's not really even a delayed payment. It's considered a direct exchange over here in this situation, and that's why it's problematic. Aval hanach devei Rabbi Yanai, but in the case of the devei Rabbi Yanai, again, devei Rabbi Yanai was the borrowing the peiros shvius and then paying back in the 8th year. Kevan dehanach aniyei demozvi luhu peire, since these poor people who lent them the produce, lav chenvani harogel lahakif, that was not a case of storekeepers that generally extended credit. So lo samcha daite kulihai, they weren't relying on it so much. V'lo mishtabed luhu devei Rabbi Yanai, there wasn't an automatic shibud of the devei Rabbi Yanai. Hilkach kipar la'achar zman, therefore, when the payment is made after some time, lav chalife shvius ninu, that was not considered an exchange of shvius, and that's why it did not have the kedusha shvius. And then the Gemara said, if so, the time of mishum makifohu, if the whole reason is because he regularly extends credit, that's why it's prohibited here. Avalein makifo shari, but if he did not regularly extend credit, it would be permitted. So it should have said that. Adetani reish, instead of saying in the beginning of the Brisa, the mahadir tani basar atera, the whole point of the beginning of the Brisa is to find the case that is mutter, that's permitted. The only case the Brisa can find is if he gives them the money and says, go use this money for whatever you want. The salik minayu nafshe v'prita, where he's removing all his obligations by giving them money. But instead of looking for that case, liflog v'lisni hetera afilu b'delo salik, you can find a case that's mutter even not in a situation where he just gives them the money and removes his obligation in that fashion. It could be the following case: go and eat, and I'll pay the storekeeper. And it's by a storekeeper that doesn't normally extend credit. Where there's no shibud, the balabais has no shibud, no real direct obligation to the storekeeper. And then for sure we would say that's true if he just removed all obligations by giving them money. And further, by a storekeeper who doesn't normally extend credit, if he were to give to an agent of the balabais, wouldn't the balabais be obligated right now to kasharis lula devei Rabbi Yanai mishum haytaima, that you're now saying that the devei Rabbi Yanai, it's permitted for them for this reason that there's no shibud? Is that really true? Isn't there a shibud even in that situation? V'yomar Rava, but Rava said, ha'omer l'chaver, if somebody says to his friend, Tain money leploni, he says to his friend, give him money to so-and-so, v'yiknu nichsoi loch, and then my property will be acquired to you, but also money with that money, v'nosan, and he gives it. And Rashi continues that in that case, kana halokech es nechasav, then through that the buyer actually will acquire his property, meaning by giving the money to Ploni, to so-and-so, now he's acquired this property of this individual. He'll acquire nechasav shel zed, this person's property. Now even though the person who's giving the property never actually received the money, he said that you should give the money to somebody else, and then you'll be able to acquire my property. And how does that work? It works midin arev, it works from the same law as a guarantor. A guarantor is somebody who's saying that I'll pay your loan. He says to a borrower, I'm going to have a responsibility to pay your loan if you don't pay it. And it's the same idea over here. It's from the same law that an orev, a guarantor, obligates himself to pay a debt. Even though he got no benefit, he was not the one that borrowed the money. So too over here, the property is going to be acquired, even though this person who's giving the property never really acquired the money. And Rashi continues, it's no different in this case over here as well by the employer. The employer should automatically have this obligation to pay the storekeeper, even though he received nothing. We see that even though it's not a storekeeper who normally extends credit, but if he gives to his agent, then this person becomes obligated. And so Rashi continues, Rava says, Lo tizni time of the brisa, don't say that the reason of the brisa that it's prohibited is mishum shibud, is because of shibud, uve makifo, in a case, it's talking about a case where he normally extends credit. Te'afilu ein makifo, ika shibud, even if he doesn't normally extend credit, there is a shibud. Umiu ledevei Rabbi Yanai lo tikshi, but nevertheless, don't ask on the case of the devei Rabbi Yanai, devein makifo, bein ein makifo, whether there was normally extended credit or whether it's a case where credit was not normally extended. Afagav de meshavdile nechse l'shlume, even though there certainly is a shibud over there to pay, but kevan de lo miyached shibude, since that shibud is not designated, it means to say as follows: shelo yichid lo miyad mos lekach, he didn't designate immediately money for this, meaning to say you have a situation again where the peiros shvius were taken, but there wasn't immediately money that was designated to be given for those peiros shvius. So lav chalipininu, it's not considered to be an exchange, velo mitzar, and it's not prohibited. But the Gemara continues and asks if it's true that when there's no designated coins for the obligations, then it is permitted. So Elahacha, then over here in this case, again in a situation where the Balabayas tells the employees, go and eat, and then I'll pay back the storekeeper. So Amai Choshesh Misham Shvius, why is there a concern in terms of Shvius? Halom Yachid Shibude, again, the obligation, there's no designated coins that are set aside for this particular obligation. Halom Yachid Shibude Hacha, again, there's nothing specifically designated for this shibud over here. And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Papa says, Kagon shehiktim lo dinar. The case actually is slightly different over here. What happened is that the Balabayas actually gave the Chenvani a dinar right at the beginning. He gave the storekeeper a dinar, and then he said, this is actually more than whatever they're going to take, and whatever they take that's less than this amount, you should pay me back. And so in that situation, it's like he directly, essentially, is responsible for giving them this produce, which is shvius produce, or doesn't have meiser taken off, etc. And Rashi explains, Kishahiktim lo, again, the case over here is that the Baal HaBayis, he gave a dinar lechenvani, he gave a dinar to the chenvani, kodem shashilach etzlo, before he sent any of these workers to him. Dahashtami, the Baal HaBayis ka'achli, v'isur didehu, so now they're really eating directly from the Baal HaBayis, and therefore it is considered to be his prohibition. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Kahana said, Amrisa l'shmaita kamei de Rav Zavid min Nahardoy, I said this teaching over in front of Rav Zavid from Nahar hardoi. And Amar Li, he said to me, Hachi, if so, if that's your explanation of the brisa, it doesn't work with the words of the brisa. Adatani tzu'u va'achlu, instead of saying go out and eat and then I'll pay back, tzu'u shasu, go out and drink, va'ani porei, and I'll pay back. That's not what it should have said. It should have said tzu'u va'achlu, tzu'u shasu, go and eat, go and drink, va'ani mechashev mi boile. It should have said that then I'll make the calculation, because really he already paid. He just has to calculate how much money he's going to get back. So Amar Lei said back to him, Tani, that actually is what it should say in the brisa. It should say, Tzu'u, go out, v'ani mechashev, and I will make the calculation. And the Gemara continues with another answer for the brisa. Rav Ashi says, Kegon shenotal v'nasan b'yad. The case actually is that he takes and gives with his hand. And Rashi explains, Shenosam miyad hachenvani, he actually took whatever the product was from the storekeeper, v'nasan lahem, and he gave it to the workers. Tahashta iu safi luisura. Now he's directly giving them the prohibited items. V'lav mishum piron delachar zmanu. It has nothing to do with the payment that's made after some time goes by. The case actually is that he acquired these objects through Mashiach, through making a kinyan. It turns out that he actually bought yayin nesach, and he gave that to his workers. But in the case by Devei Rabbi Yanai, again, by the produce of the Shemitah year, and then they were paid back in the 8th year, kishakli pei reshas heteru, at the time that he took the produce, it actually was still a time where it was mutter. V'chiparu lachar zman b'shas iser shvius lav chalipin ninu. And then when he paid back after some time, now already the Isser Shvius applies. That's really not a Chalipin at that time, and therefore the Isser does not transfer. What Rashi is referring to over here is the fact that Pero Shvius, that have the Kedusha Shvius, they're not prohibited until what's called the Zman Bir, the time of destruction. There's a discussion in the Rishonim exactly what happens at the Zman Bir, but the point is the prohibition doesn't set in until later at that point in time. So therefore, in the case of Devei Rabbi Yanai, when they took the produce originally, it was still a Shas Heter, and then they're paying it back later on, so it's not considered to be an exchange of Shvius. That's why it's mutter in that case. But in this case over here, where he takes directly from the Chenvoni and he gives it to the workers, that already is going to be problematic. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Yemar le Rav Ashi. Rav Yemar said to Rav Ashi, Ihachi, if so, if the case is shenatal v'nasan biyad, that the Balabais took it directly from the Chenvoni and then gave it to the workers. Adetani tzu'u v'achlu tzu'u shasu, instead of saying go and eat, go and drink, that's not what it should say, because he's not telling them to go out and get the food, he's giving it to them. It should be telu v'achlu, take and eat, telu ushasu, take and drink, mi boile. That's what the Brisa actually should have said. And the Gemara says, Amar le, said back to him, Tani, that is what it should say. It really should say, Telu v'achlu, telu shasu, take and eat, take and drink. And the Gemara continues, Yosef, Rav Nachman, Ve'ula, V'avimi bar Papi. Rav Nachman and Ula and Avimi bar Papi were sitting. Ve'yosef, Rabbi Chia bar Ami Gabayu, and Rabbi Chia bar Ami, he was sitting by them. Ve'yasvi v'kami boilu, and they were sitting and they were asking the following question. Secharo lishbor b'yein nesach ma'u. Let's say the person is hired in order to break barrels of yayin nesach. What's the halacha? This is talking about a Jewish person who is hired. Mi'amrin on kevan derotza b'kiyum. What do we say? That since he wants this wine to actually stay intact until he's the one that breaks it, so maybe it's prohibited, maybe it's problematic, he shouldn't be able to take wages for that. Odilmer, maybe kolim mu'ute tifla, whatever you're doing, which is meant to reduce impropriety, so shaper dami, it's a good thing. Essentially, he's an agent to break this yayin nesach, so fundamentally it's a good thing. He should be able to take the wages. Rashi explains he's hired lishbor b'yayin nesach, to break barrels of yayin nesach, l'shaber chovis v'lishbo ches hayayin. He's supposed to break the barrels and pour out the wine. Ma'ushi yehei schara mutter. What's the halacha? Is he able to take the wages? Are the wages permitted to him? Mi'amrinon kevan de Yisrael zeh rotze b'kiyuman shel chavios ha'elu. Do we say that since this Jewish person who's supposed to be breaking the barrels, he doesn't want anything to happen to these barrels until he breaks it? Shelo yishtabru achsha me'aleim. He doesn't want, for example, that they should break now on their own. Ad sheyishabrim hu. He wants to make sure that he's the one that breaks them. V'yitol secharim, and then he'll be able to get the wages. So then maybe we should say that this is actually prohibited, or on the contrary, maybe we should say that since he's really involved in breaking these barrels and getting rid of the ayin nesach, that's a good thing. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman says, Yishbor, he should break it. V'tavo ala bracha, he should be blessed. It's a good thing what he's doing. He can take the wages. The Gemara says, Lema Messiah, let's say a support for him from the following brisa. It says in the brisa, Ein odrin im ha'ovet kol chavim b'kilayim, one cannot dig or hoe together with an Ovid Kochavim, with an idolater, when it comes to areas of the field which are kilayim, which are mixture. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Dalid Amud Aleph.